Good morning, everyone. It's indeed my privilege today to welcome to my class my own teacher, mentor, and my former boss, Professor Kiran Gupta. My first tryst with Delhi University was with ma'am, and she's been such a mother figure to me throughout these years. And I'm so blessed to have her with me. In my life and have her today here in the class. In fact, ma'am was the first person that I approached, but somehow we couldn't schedule her as the first lecture. So ma'am, yours is the second lecture today. First was taken by Vageshwari ma'am, and the third will be taken by Usha Ramnathan ma'am. So this is a series which is going on. So we wanted you to be the first, but unfortunately it just couldn't fold up, but that's okay.
It's all right.
Yeah. Ma'am, welcome to National Law University, though virtually, but we hope that we will meet in person soon. Ma'am, this is a class primarily of the graduating students, the fifth year students. They are having a special paper on women in law. So not all have opted out of 200 students, it's only 40 students. And there are some students from first and second year who are free who have joined the event. So there are people from all the college. I'm sure one or two faculty members have also joined as attendees. So they will not be able to interrupt you in between, but they'll be able to type in the chat box. So after the conclusion of your lecture, if they have any questions, I'll put them through. So it is going to be a moderated session. And Astha is here. She'll introduce you formally to all the students and attendees.
Okay, thank you, Nandita. A very good morning to all of you. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to meet you virtually.
Astha, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. I hope I'm audible and visible.
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay, a very good morning to everyone and welcome to the lecture series organized by the Center for Women in Law at National Law University, Odisha. I, Astha Mittal, on behalf of the center, give my heartiest greetings and warmest welcome to our guest lecturer for the day, Professor Dr. Kiran Gupta ma'am, along with our esteemed panelists, Dr. Yogesh Pratap Singh sir, as well as our honorable faculty advisors without whom this would have not been possible, Dr. Owais Hassan Khan sir, Professor Nandita Batra ma'am, and Dr. Priyanka Anand ma'am. Though it would be difficult to express in words how wonderful a person and academician Dr. Kiran ma'am is, I will try my utmost best to do the same. She has done her LLB, LLM, and PhD from the Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. With over 30 years of teaching experience in the vivacious field of law, she has immense knowledge and has portrayed the same through her numerous publications and lectures in a variety of areas, from medical negligence to the sexual harassment of women at their workplaces. In addition to this, she has also been an editor to the National Capital Law Journal since 2005. Today, she will be speaking about something that is very important but yet goes ignored, the property rights of women. I request you, ma'am, to enlighten us with your knowledge. It is truly an honor to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Astha. Let me begin with, as the topic is property rights of women, but my main emphasis will be on the right of the women to get or to inherit the agricultural property. You know, most of the property in India is agricultural property. But just to give a bird's eye view of what are the rights or what were the rights and what are now the rights, let us begin with property rights. As far as property rights of women are concerned, if we look at the Hindu law, we will find that women were not given the right to own the property. Whatever property they had, it was basically divided into two categories: her limited estate and Stridhan. Over the Stridhan, she had ownership, but that is limited just to the jewelry, etc., clothes and jewelry, etc., given to her at the time of marriage or before marriage or on various festivals or other auspicious occasions. All other, first of all, she was not having the right to get property, because you know the major source, the most important source of getting a property is to succeed the property of your ancestors. And women in India were not having this right. Hindu law did not provide for succession of property by the female heirs of female relatives of that person. Males were given the preference over the female. Like if a male died and is survived by sons and daughters, Hindu law provided, I am talking about the classical Hindu law, provided that whole of his property will be shared by the male heirs and nothing will go to the female. Even the widow of the deceased person, the descendant, or we can say the intestate, was not having the right to get the property of the deceased husband. So that was the position of women. Not only that they were not entitled to inherit the landed property, but they have no right to inherit even the movable assets which the intestate has left behind. This was the position. And if some property is given to them, except her clothes and jewelry, etc., all other property, say if the father gifted the property to a daughter, even that property was not treated as her absolute property. Throughout her life, the property is treated as the property of some other person. Like if she is unmarried, if the daughter is unmarried, it is treated as the property of whatever rights she has is up to her life only. And on her death, it will devolve as the property of the father. If she is married, as far as her own property is concerned, she will be the owner or can enjoy, owner in limited owner, that she can enjoy the property for her life. And on her death, the property will invariably devolve on the descendants of the, or you can say heirs of the husband. So the women were not having the absolute right to own the property in India. As far as Muslim law is concerned, this restriction was not there that they cannot owe, but as if we look at the practical aspects, what was in practice, the fact was there that women were not the owner of the property. And so when they died, they have not left behind anything, because whatever they left behind, behind it will devolve if they are unmarried as the property of their father, or if they are married, then as the property of husband. And even if they are earning, they have no absolute control on their earnings. If they are married, their right to use that property was subject to the consent of the husband. So right of a woman to owe and to inherit property was, you can say, negligible. But with the enactment of the acts, with the enactment of the Hindu Succession Act applicable to Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh and Jain, and other laws for other communities like Indian Succession Act, which applies to Christians, and another part of Indian Succession Act which applies to Parsis, etc., the position of the women has been improved. Now, today what we are going to do is we will look into what is the present position of women. So, and since present position of a women to owe and have right on the property. And by property here, I mean the landed property. And I will mainly emphasize on this agriculture property. As you know, inheritance law in India find their roots in the diverse religious beliefs of different communities that have coexisted for ages. Belief and practices within these religious communities varied with regions, caste, and customs, as did the practices related to inheritance. In the 20th century, when the British interventions crystallized certain customs and legal doctrines, the emerging set of laws remained largely conservative with respect to the rights of women, because the Britishers, when they codified the law in India, they left outside the ambit of this codification the personal laws of the parties, and all that ensured the existing patriarchal and patrilineal hold over the land. After independence, the Hindu Succession Act, which is applicable to Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh and Jain, was enacted in 1956, and it was enacted by the parliament, and it introduced some progressive provisions. But what we have to discuss today is whether these provisions are sufficient and actually give equal property rights to female. As far as this act is concerned, let me tell you, before we come to that, in Hindu law, the property of a person was classified into two categories: the separate property and the joint family property, which is also called the co-partnership property. The Hindu Succession Act deals with devolution of a male and a female's separate property by succession. Though there is a provision, one provision in the Act, Section 6, which says that, which protects the earlier, actually it protects the earlier law of devolution by survivorship of the joint family property. But it provides that if a male Hindu having an undivided interest in the co-partnership property died, leaving behind that undivided interest, and is survived by any of the class 1 female heirs, then his undivided interest will devolve by survivorship, by succession, and not by survivorship. And since it will devolve by succession under the Act, where the male and female, son as well as daughters, both were made co-heirs, having equal right to inherit, the share of that intestate will devolve on all class 1 heirs. So that way, to some extent, an inroad was made into the right of a daughter to claim some property from the joint family also. But daughters were not declared to be co-partner by the 1956 Act. As far as the separate property of the intestate is concerned, both sons and daughters, along with widow and mother, were made the class 1 heirs, were entitled to inherit simultaneously in equal share. And if a son or a daughter predeceased that owner of the property, then the share of that son or daughter would have gone to their own descendants, that is their sons and their daughters. So this is the scheme provided as far as separate property is concerned. But although this provision, the scheme of succession given in the Act made daughter and widow and mother, and even the daughter, the widow of a predeceased son, and even widow of a predeceased son of a predeceased son, they were made class 1 heirs who all are entitled to inherit the property simultaneously. But there was a provision in the Hindu Succession Act, Section 23, which says that if the intestate has left behind a dwelling house, and that dwelling house is occupied, wholly occupied by the members of the family, then these female heirs have no right to claim division of that house and get the separate possession of their share. Now take an example. A died and he is survived by 2 sons and 3 daughters. The moment he died, he is survived by 2 sons, 3 daughters, a widow and a mother. Now, all of them, widow, mother, 3 daughters and 2 sons, all are class 1 heir. As per the scheme of succession provided, all of them will inherit in equal share. So the share of each one of them, there are 3 plus 2 plus 2, 7 heirs, each one of them will become, on the death of the owner of that house, each one of them will become the owner of 1/7 of this house. But unfortunately, so long as these 2 sons, they decide to divide that house between them, the 5 female owners who collectively owe 5/7 part of that house cannot claim division of that property. And you know, the most valuable item which a person left behind is the dwelling house. whatever you earn, you want to invest it in dwelling house. According to your earning, according to your status, according to your capability, first of all, you would like to have a house, a good house to live in. And now after your death, it will devolve on your sons and daughters and your widow and your mother. But these daughters and the widow and the mother, and if there is any predeceased widow of any predeceased son, they cannot claim division of that property. And as far as right of the daughter is concerned, if they are married and they are happily married, not deserted or divorced by their husband, then they have no right even to live in that house. Now, 5/7 part of the house belong to these female heirs who become the owner of that house, but they cannot claim division. And 3 daughters, if they are married, they don't have even the right to live in that house. So what is given by the general scheme of succession to a great extent has been taken away by section 23. So this is a very, very big drawback in the Hindu Succession Act. Not only that the daughter has not been made a co-partner consists of 3 generations of male members who were born in the family or adopted in the family. And female members were not co-partners as per Hindu. So not only that they could not have any right to ancestral property, and you know agricultural property is also always, it is ancestral. And as far as agricultural holding rights are concerned, they are transferable and heritable. So if the present owner of holding rights in agricultural property, tenancy rights in tenurial owner died, his right will devolve by succession on his heirs. And from that, the female were excluded. And and they were also not co-partners. In the Act, 1956 Act, Section 4 is there, and Section 4 provides that the provision of this Act, Hindu Succession Act, will override any other textual law, customary law, any rule or interpretation of classical Hindu law, or any statutory law enacted prior to the commencement of that act, if of this act, Hindu Succession Act, if it is contrary to the provision of Hindu Succession Act. So overriding effect to the provision of Hindu Succession Act over the pre-existing law, whether it is a law originating from Dharma Shastra or originating from customs or an enacted law, statutory law, was given to the provision of the Hindu Succession Act. But in that very section, subsection 2 was there. And subsection 2 says that nothing contained in this act will override any law which is enacted for the purpose of abolition of jamindari, fixation of ceiling, prevention of fragmentation of land, or for devolution of agricultural holding rights. So, though the act has been given overriding effect to the pre-existing succession laws, first of all, the law relating to co-partnery was not much dealt with by the statute. So the earlier law continued to apply, the uncodified classical law, the Mitakshara law of co-partnery, and the Dayabhag law. Among the Hindus, there are 2 schools of law. And the main difference among these 2 schools are on succession rights, scheme of succession. So these 2, as far as joint family property is concerned, they continue to apply. And even the agricultural holding rights will continue to be governed by the laws enacted by the state governments, or you can say provincial government, because prior to the constitution, they were provinces and not states. They continue to apply, on the Hindus, even though the provisions of those statutes were in violation of the Hindu succession. So we can say that while the 1956 law granted Hindu women an equal right to inherit property acquired by a descendant, it retained the concept of coparcenary or joint heirship or devolution by survivorship in Hindu undivided family and excluded women from being coparceners. Consequently, 4 generations of male coparceners held joint ownership of the coparcenary property. They have right by birth in that property, and they have right, they could ask for partition of that coparcenary property. And if any of the co-partner died, the share of that co-partner devolved by survivorship on the surviving co-partners. And in that property, no female could be a co-partner and hence had no right by birth or no right to claim partition or no right to have a share at the time of partition and no right even to get it by way of survivorship. The other major shortcoming, which we have just now discussed, is Section 23, which was there in the Hindu Succession Act. And the third, which also we have referred to, is in relation to inheritance of tenurial rights, or meaning thereby agricultural land, which states regulate through their various acts. And it is because of existence of subsection 2 of section 4 in the Hindu Succession Act, which exempts these lands and leaving such rights to be governed according to the local tenancy and land reform laws of the state. Fortunately, the Hindu Succession Act was amended in 2005, and very drastic changes relating to succession law has been introduced by the Hindu Succession Act. First of all, Section 23 has been deleted. The effect of deleting Section 23 is that the restriction on the right of the female heir, which was there under Section 23, to that they cannot claim division of the dwelling house if the dwelling house is occupied by the members of the family. And who are the members of the family? The sons of the owner, original owner. They continue to remain in that family, and so only they will have a right to enjoy, though they are not the full owner of the property. So that section was deleted, and now after 2005 Act permits a female heir also, or you can say a daughter or a widow or a mother or son's widow or son's widow, to claim division of the dwelling house also and seek separate exclusive possession of their part of the property. Once they get the exclusive possession, they are free to do whatever they want to that property. If they are not having anything to feed themselves, then they can give it on rent, they can sell it, they can do whatever they want to do. So they will become the exclusive owner of that property, which right was not there prior to 2005. And as per the interpretation given to it, the court said that this deletion has to be treated as retrospectively. We presume that it was not there from the very beginning in the act, and the cases where the owner died prior to the 2005 amendment, even in those cases, now after the commencement of the act, females can claim division of their right. So one shortcoming of the act has been removed by that statute deleting Section 23. But that is as far as dwelling house is concerned, which is not agricultural property. As far as the second main drawback of the Hindu Succession Act was concerned, that has also been removed, and the daughters have been made co-partners in the joint family property, just like a son. If my son is my co-partner, is a co-partner with me, my daughter will also be a co-partner with me. And if say I am a male Hindu and in my hand some property is joint family property, it is our ancestral property, it is our joint family property, it is our co-personal property, then if there is partition, any one of us first of all can claim partition of that property, because since the daughters have been made co-partners with same rights and liabilities as a son, they acquire right by birth in property just like the son, just like my son. So she will also become, my daughters will also become joint owner of that property with me. And say if I have a son and a daughter, then either I may claim partition, or my son may claim partition, or my daughter may claim partition. And if there is partition, each one of us will be entitled to have an equal share. And the act also provides that the share of a co-partner in the joint family property, if they died before partition of that share, then that share will devolve by succession and not by survivorship. So say the daughter of A, there is a joint family consisting of A, his son, and a daughter. The daughter died prior to partition, before claiming partition of the property. Now, on her death, her share in the joint family property will devolve as her separate property, and it will go to her own children and will not devolve by survivorship on A or A's son. So that is the consequence. Now, the other lacuna or drawback which was there in 1956 Act has now been removed, though by amending Section 6, and though such amendment of Section 6 itself has created lots of problems of interpretation, but now the Supreme Court has finally settled most of them in various decisions, like very recently in August 2020, it has been settled that irrespective of the fact whether the father, the father died before 2005 or after 2005, if there is no partition in the family, actual partition in the family before 2005, daughters are entitled to have a share. Because some controversy arose that if the father died before 2005, then what will happen? There will be notional partition and it should be treated as actual partition. The partition to already ho gaya. Now there is nothing left joint, in which these daughters who are declared to be co-partners from the date of commencement of the act, amending act, that is 9th of September 2005, can claim anything. So that problem has now been solved. The third major drawback which was there in the act was subsection 2 of section 4. And as far as this section is concerned, in the unamended Act of 1956, it was a distinct source of gender inequality. This section stated that the law did not affect the provision of any tenurial law or any state law which provides for prevention of fragmentation of agricultural holding, or for fixation of land ownership ceilings, or for the devolution of tenancy rights in such holding. Section 4.2, under section 4, subsection 2, interest in agricultural land under tenancy passed according to the order of devolution specified in the local tenurial laws, which vary from state to state. Actually, these land is a matter which fall in the jurisdiction of the state. You know, in Constitution, we have 7th schedule, and in 7th schedule, we have 3 lists, list 1, list 2, and list 3. On matters specified in list 1, only the union government, that is parliament, can enact a law. In matters specified in list 2, only the state government, state legislature has the power to enact law. Third list is called concurrent list, and if a matter is specified in concurrent list, both center and state has equal power to enact law. But if there is a law enacted by parliament, then state cannot enact a law contrary to parliamentary law without getting the assent of the president. Land is a subject which is a state subject. List 2, entry 18 deals with agriculture, land including agriculture. While marriage, divorce, succession, inheritance, they fall in the concurrent list, list 3, entry 5. So in matters relating to succession, etc., Parliament has the power to enact law. And in exercise of that power only, that these 4 Hindu statutes were enacted, like Hindu Marriage Act 1955, Hindu Succession Act 1956, Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act 1956, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act 1956. So in exercise of that power, the parliament has enacted the law. Since there is a parliamentary law, state cannot enact, or if they want to enact, and the unmarried daughters were made co-partners in 4 states prior to the 2005 amendment. But for making a different law from parliamentary law, these states sent their act to the president for assent, and after getting the president's assent, their law became enforceable law. So as far as land is concerned, especially agricultural land is concerned, its transfer and devolution, it's basically transfer alienation is the state subject only. It is not in the union list or in the concurrent list, but succession is in the concurrent list. As we have discussed that 2005 amendment removed section 4 subsection 2 of the 1956 Act. So many believe, and rightly believe, that removal of section 4 subsection 2 implies that Hindu Succession Act 1956 will apply to the inheritance of agricultural land in all states. But the implication of removal of this section is not so simple. In practice, removal of section 4 subsection 2 has intensified the confusion over which laws govern inheritance of agricultural land. Some scholars, and of course there is difference among the judiciary also, some scholars and judges emphasize that state law now govern inheritance of agricultural land, while other believes that inheritance of agricultural land will now be governed by the Hindu Succession Act 1956. And whether that agricultural land is self-owned or ancestral property of the father, on the death of the father, it will devolve on son as well as daughter. It will devolve as per the scheme of succession provided under the Hindu Succession Act. And in Hindu Succession Act, if we look at the provision, the priority for inheritance is given to the female than over the males. The Muslim communities remain unaffected by this change, since Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application Act clearly exempts agricultural land from its purview. So as far as the Muslim personal law is concerned, it was never applicable to agricultural land. Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application of 1937, by its section 2, provide that in matter relating to this means marriage, divorce, marriage, dissolution of marriage, conditions of marriage, matrimonial rights, guardianship, minority, custody, succession, inheritance, except agricultural land, inheritance of agricultural land, a Muslim will be governed by Muslim law. So since from the statute itself, agricultural land is specifically from the very beginning excluded from the Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application Act, the change which is introduced into the Hindu Succession Act has no effect to them. They were in their, as per their law, agricultural land used to devolve by state law, and it will continue to be devolved by state law. The problem is when such subsection 2 of section 4 has been deleted from Hindu Succession Act, which specifically protected the state laws for devolution of agricultural holding rights. When that section has been deleted, what is the implication? What is the effect? Will the agricultural holding rights still after 2005 amendment be devolved as per the land laws, or now since the subsection 2 is not there, the agricultural holding right will also come within the ambit of Hindu Succession Act, where the scheme of succession is to a great extent gender neutral. No disparity between male child and female child. Now, and the root of this confusion is the Constitution of India. The Constitution of India creates a threefold distribution of legislative powers between the center and the state. This distribution is effected through three lists, which we have already discussed: union list, state list, concurrent list. Within these three lists, center and states have legislative authority over different aspects of land governance. For example, while agricultural land falls under the state list, issues related to wills, intestate succession, partition, and transfer of land, excluding agricultural land, are part of the concurrent list. Consequently, while center and state share jurisdiction over succession, because succession is in the concurrent list, third list, entry 5, transfer of agricultural land, transfer and alienation of agricultural land exclusively falls under the domain of state under entry list 2, entry 80. This overlay allows state to amend personal laws such as Hindu Succession Act 1956 at the state level and simultaneously enact independent inheritance provision for agricultural land. We have discussed it, that states can have their land laws and create this problem. And most of the states have their land laws. Inheritance of property is generally governed by personal laws of each religion. While personal law determines inheritance of all types of property, the Indian states and all the Indian states can broadly be grouped into 4 categories based on the succession schemes which apply to agricultural land held under tenancy. So we can categorize these states, including some of the union territories like Delhi. Delhi is not a full-fledged state, into 4 categories of states. Category 1, you can say, these are the states such as Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Telangana, where tenurial law explicitly, tenurial law, these laws are somewhere they are called Land Revenue Acts, somewhere they are called Land Revenue Code, somewhere where they are called Land Reform Act, like in Delhi we have Delhi Land Reform Act. So these tenurial laws explicitly mention application of personal laws for inheritance of agricultural land held under tenancy. Here, inheritance of agricultural land for Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, Jain is by Hindu law, and Muslims and other religious communities are governed by their respective personal laws. So first category of states are where the land laws specifically says that devolution of agricultural tenancy rights in agricultural holding will be as per the personal law applicable to the parties. As far as these states are concerned, these are the three states, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Telangana. And in Rajasthan, we have Rajasthan Tenancy Act of 1955. In Madhya Pradesh, we have Madhya Pradesh Land Revenue Code of 1959. In Telangana, also we have Telangana Area Tenancy Act of 1950. And since they provide the devolution of agricultural property, holding rights in agricultural property is also by the personal law, whatever is the personal law applicable to the person, if the land right owner, the holder of the agricultural land is, they are named by, they are called by different names like Bhumidar, Bhumidhar, etc. etc. बहुत सारे नाम है उनके. They are called by different names. So by whatever name they are called, even the agricultural property. So Muslim succession law, which is the Hindu Succession Act, as amended in 2005, will apply to Hindus, where there is no difference between a daughter and a son. Muslim law will apply to Muslims, where a right of a daughter is to get half of what the son is getting. Where the party is Christian, even the agricultural holding right will devolve by the Christian law, that is the Indian Succession Act, where there is no difference between son and daughter. And son, daughter, and widow inherit simultaneously. Share of the widow is fixed. And the only problem is that if a person is survived by father as well as mother, mother will exclude the father in Christian law. If they are Parsis, then there is no problem. Son and daughters inherit simultaneously. Widow inherit along with the son and daughter. And parent inherits simultaneously with son and daughter and widow. But the share of parents is half of what the son or the daughter is getting. So that if the state fall in category 1, that is 3 states, Telangana, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan, the devolution will be as per the personal. In some other states, these land laws are silent regarding inheritance of agricultural land. They neither provide a scheme of succession in their statutes, nor do they say that devolution will be as per the personal laws. And these are in most of the states in southern, central, and northeastern India, state laws are silent. So in this category fall Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Goa, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, Odisha, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. Majority of the states fall in this category, that they neither provide their land laws, neither provide a specific scheme of devolution of agricultural holding rights, nor do they say that it will devolve as per the personal law. In those states, the academicians and the jurists are of the view that by default the agricultural holding rights will devolve as per the personal law of the parties. So in category 1 as well as in category 2, the devolution will be as per the personal law of the party. There are third category states. These are the states which are specified in 5th and the 6th schedule of the Constitution. And why these states are different? These states are different because most of the residents are tribal. So this includes tribal areas and regions within Indian states, mostly found amongst the northeastern states like Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura, which fall under the 6th schedule, which allows these states to adopt local rules in accordance with their customary practices. So there, the devolution will be, as you know, as far as Hindu Succession Act is concerned, it is not applicable to scheduled tribe Hindus. So most of these areas are tribal areas. So it is permitted there that they can have their customary law applicable to them. The union and states law are not enforceable in these regions unless approved by the district council. Tribal regions in other states fall under the 5th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which along with the 6th schedule regulate governance of the tribal areas. And there also it is the tribal law which is applicable and not the enacted law, whether it is enacted by the state government or by the parliament. There is a 4th category of state. And these are the states where tenurial laws enumerate a separate succession rule or separate scheme of succession for devolution of agricultural land. This category includes states in northwestern region like Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Uttarakhand. In these 5 states and 1 union territory, Delhi, the tenurial laws, land laws specify, give a specific scheme of succession in these statutes. And women's inheritance rights in these states are much inferior to male heirs as compared to states in other category. The problem, the main problem which we are facing is relating to these states which provide in their land laws a different scheme of succession than the one provided by the Hindu Succession Act. So if we look at the category 1 states, even Jammu and Kashmir also fall in this category. And the provisions of Hindu Succession Act has now been extended to that Jammu and Kashmir. The problem arises only for the category 4 states. And if we look at the various laws applicable there, in UP we have a separate UP land law, which was enacted in 1950, which has now been replaced by the Uttar Pradesh Revenue Code Act of 2016. The scheme in the earlier act was very, very discriminatory against women. Fortunately, the scheme provided by the new revenue code, UP Revenue Code of 2016, which has been adopted by Uttaranchal also, is quite gender neutral. There, the rights of the women are protected. So as far as Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand are concerned, there is a different scheme, but the scheme is not highly objectionable as after the 2016 enactment of the Land Revenue Code. In Himachal Pradesh, we have Himachal Pradesh Tenancy and Land Reforms Act of 1972. In Punjab and Haryana, we have Punjab Tenancy Act 1887, which was amended in 1977. And in Delhi, we have Delhi Land Reform Act of 1950, which was amended in 1966. And Section 50 of the Delhi Land Reforms Act gave specific scheme of succession. And if we look at the scheme of succession, the daughters nowhere find their place. Inheritance rights is, first of all, male descendants. In the absence of male descendant, widow. But if the widow will get, she will get only for her life. In the absence of widow, it is of father. In the absence of father, brothers. In the absence of brothers, mother. Again, mother will get only life estate. In the absence of mother, brothers, sons, etc., etc. And daughters were not the heirs of agricultural land as per the Delhi Land Reform Act. Analysis of the provisions of these states reveals a systematic patriarchal bias which exclude women from inheritance line of agricultural land. While inheritance law in general discriminate against women, the discrimination in tenurial laws of these states is severely pronounced, and these discrimination include the following the major types. First of all, primacy to the male lineal descent. Invariably, in all these statutes, in the first, the male line of descent are preferred over all other heirs. Only the male line, not the female line. Second discriminatory fact is whenever the right of the women to inherit agricultural land arises, then women hold a limited interest only, and they will not become the primary heir, the absolute owner. Third is, since women are only the limited owner right holder in the property, when they die, the property devolves as the property of the male heirs of the family. It devolved to the male heirs of the family, and women was not recognized, no recognition of women as primary heir. And there, in these statutes, wherever you find that daughters are given some right at a very low place to inherit, unmarried daughters are preferred over married daughters. Married daughters had no right to inherit, and if they have any right, it is only in the absence of unmarried daughters. So this is the position of the law, statutory law, which prevails today. Now, coming to how this provision has been interpreted by the courts. In this context, the legal plurality and unclear application, numerous state court judgments have sought to clarify the relationship between union law and the state laws. However, divergent court opinions on repealing the limited scope of Hindu Succession Act have emerged over time. And in this, I would like to discuss in brief, in 10 minutes. Now, Nandita, do I have time?
Ma'am, if it is possible, I know it's going very interesting, but they have another class scheduled.
At what time?
Ma'am, at 12:40. So another 5 minutes if we can quickly conclude.
Okay. A case was decided by Delhi High Court in 2010, Nirmala versus Government of National Capital Territory. The Delhi High Court, I am not going into detail of that because of time. The Delhi High Court in this case was of the opinion that the agricultural holding right used to devolve as per the Delhi Land Reform Act because of presence of subsection 2 of section 4 in the Hindu Succession Act. And now in 2005, clause 2, subsection 2 has been deleted from section 4. So even the agricultural holding rights will devolve as per Hindu Succession Act. This is what the Delhi High Court decided in this case. In another case, decided in 2012 by Himachal Pradesh High Court, Roshan Lal versus Pritam Singh, the same view was taken, and it was decided that the agricultural holding rights will devolve as per the Hindu Succession Act after 2005. But in 2015, Allahabad High Court in Archana versus Directorate of Consolidation, Amroha, took a different view. The Allahabad High Court emphasized on the fact, the judge deciding the case in that court, emphasized on the fact that it is not a question of parliamentary law or state law. What we have to see is the field of jurisdiction. Union has no power at all to enact a law on land matters. So even if they have deleted subsection 2, it will not affect the application of land laws on devolution of agricultural holding rights. So in the opinion of Allahabad High Court, the land holding rights will devolve as per the land law, even though subsection 2 is not there in Hindu succession. Later on in 2019, Supreme Court of India decided a case, Babu Ram versus Santosh Singh. In this case, the dispute does not relate to who will inherit the agricultural holding right, but the dispute relate to application of section 22 of the Hindu Succession Act. In this case, two brothers inherited the agricultural property of their father. After the death of the father, they inherited it jointly, and they make an arrangement that you will tilt this part of the land and I will tilt this part of the land, and actually there was no partition. Then one of the brother wants to sell his property. He was not interested in tilting his part of the land. So he sent a notice to the other brother. Other brother is Santosh Singh, and he sold it to Babu Ram, who is an outsider. Section 22 of the Hindu Succession Act says that if land or a running business is inherited by more than one heir simultaneously, co-heir, and if any one of them wants to sell it, then first right should be of the other co-heirs. The one who wants to sell has to offer it first to the other co-heirs, and if they refuse, then only they can sell it in the open market. So without offering it to be purchased by Santosh Singh, his brother Nathuram sell it into the Babu Ram. So when he come to know, Santosh Singh come to know that his brother sold his share, his land to an outsider, he filed a petition for application of he filed an application under section 22 that preferential right to purchase must be given to me. And it is how the question of application of law, which law, land law or Hindu Succession Act, arose. As per the land law, there was no restriction, no such provision as is there in the Hindu Succession Act 22. In Hindu Succession Act, it should be offered to Santosh Singh. Under the land law, there is no such provision that it should first be offered to the other co-heir. The court in this case discussed very beautifully whole of the constitutional power of the state and the parliament, differentiated the language in the list provided under the Government of India Act 1935 and the Indian Constitution 1950, that there is a difference. Earlier, the entry 18 of state list provide that transfer, alienation and devolution of agricultural land. But in the Constitution of 1950, only transfer and alienation is there, devolution has been removed. And similarly, in clause entry 5 of the union list also, some change has been introduced, which shows that as far as succession of agricultural land is concerned, it will fall there. So they started discussing it very beautifully. And it looked that the Supreme Court is going to decide that after the deletion of this provision, subsection 2, the agricultural holding right will devolve as per Hindu succession. But court refrained itself from making this declaration, though the court decided that section 22 of the Hindu Succession Act applies, and the brother who has sold his share should have offered it first to the other brother. That court has decided, but court could have but has not clarified. The Supreme Court of India upheld that section 1955 applied to the agricultural land as well. However, the court also clarified that it has not ruled on the question of whether a pre-existing state law that governs agricultural succession will be superseded by Hindu Succession Act in future or not. So court had left it undecided under which scheme the property will devolve, whether under the Himachal Pradesh Land Tenancy Act or under the Hindu Succession Act. Court has not finally give a pronouncement on this, but still court said that Section 22 of the Hindu Succession Act will apply. So interestingly, what the court could have done it in Babu Ram's case, they failed to do it. And the legislature also, when they deleted subsection 2 in 2005 from the Hindu Succession Act, they could have specifically mentioned there that even the land holding rights in agricultural property will devolve as per the provision of this act. But they failed to do it. Though had there been such a provision, it would again be problematic that Muslims will continue in these 6 states, 5 states and 1 union territory, Delhi. The Muslim would be governed by the scheme provided under the act. It is only the Hindus who will be governed by the Hindu Succession Act. So that problem would have been created. But neither the legislature had bothered to resolve this dispute, nor the Supreme Court, who got the opportunity to settle the dispute in Babu Ram, has finally settled it. Though it seems that court is going towards settling the controversy. So I think that's all. Because of time, I cannot continue.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking us to various nuances of property law. I mean, had I been discussing, I would have done it pseudo, just discuss the Hindu Succession Act and not gone into all these details. I basically have not referred. I mean, I don't think so. Anyone who takes gender justice as a paper takes the impact of tenurial provisions or the Land Reform Act on women rights. And precisely when we search for answer, why the position of rural women is still worse as compared to urban women is because all that they have is agricultural property and a dwelling house, both of which were subject to discriminatory rules. So it's getting...
You know, Nandita, 70% of the labor in land is of female.
Yes.
And 13% of female are the owner.
Yes.
Labor
Yes.
is 70% and ownership 13% only.
Yes, that's a fact, ma'am. And I guess this last question that we were discussing, Babu Ram's question, this also has a bearing to the farm laws controversy, which has recently arisen, that whether the center has the power to amend laws in another list, especially the farm laws. So that's another question which might intersect there also.
Yeah.
Ma'am, thank you so much for such an interesting lecture. I'm sure the students would have made notes. In fact, I took all the notes of all the cases and provisions that you referred. Thank you for such an exhaustive and detailed explanation of how various laws interact with each other, and that's where the position of women actually comes into picture. I mean, it's not just one law we can read and then comment on it, because Hindu Succession Act has been amended, we say amelioration has happened, there are still some changes which need to be made, or still some judicial conflicts which need to be solved in the meantime. Ma'am, we are so delighted to have you here. On behalf of all my students and National Law University and Center for Women in Law, I thank you for sparing your valuable time and coming and sharing your expert knowledge with us.